Hi everyone, I am Varun Yadav, and in this video I am going to show you how you can use form created in Visual Builder with process automation. Let's start with simple demo at what we will achieve by end of this video. So we have this simple process over here where user submits a form and approver decides whether this form will be approved or rejected, and if it's rejected, user will resubmit the form again. But instead of using the form that is built into process automation, we will create a form in Visual Builder and map that to the process. So if I go to the Visual Builder application, I'll go to the main start, and over here, this is our form that user triggers initially. So this is for the new employee request. So they will fill out the basic details like first name, last name, date of birth, email, and address. And for the manager group, we have created another form, and this is a read-only form that will be viewed by manager. And when the user is resubmitting a form, it will be a similar form that we have initially, but the only difference is this time when they click save, it will update the task instead of creating a new process. So with that, let's get into how we can create this. We will start by creating a process application. Let's give it a name. We will call it new employee. Once the application is created, we will create a new structured process and we'll give it a name new employee request. Now let's create a role for user who will be accessing this application. So that will be requester and approver. Once the role is created, let's go back to the process, and now we'll add the streamline. So we'll hit the pencil icon and we'll select the role. This is for requester and the another one will be for the approver. Now for the requester, we'll change the start event type to message start because we want to start the event from the Visual Builder. And then we will add a human activity that will be of type approve, and we want to add a gateway. We'll add the exclusive gateway because approver can either approve or reject the task. So let's say if they reject the task, the user wants to resubmit the application once again. So we'll drag and drop the submit activity in the requester. And now let's connect the dots between all the activity. So we'll delete the first that is by default between start and the end event, and and we'll change the user task to approve request, and from approve request to exclusive gateway. All right. So now from approve, first it will go to the end event, and then another will go to the user task one, and user task one will be a resubmit form. And once the form is submitted, it will go back to the approve request. So now for resubmit, there needs to be a condition which needs to be defined, right? So what we can do is like we can create a variable, and the name of the variable will be task outcome data object, and it will be of type string. And over here now, if I click on the pencil icon, what I can say is task outcome data object equal to reject. Then only it will go to the resubmit, otherwise it will go to the end event, and we can rename the end event to completed. All right, perfect. So this is very simple flow, and over here we can also add some more details. So we can say over here more information required, and we can say yes. So it make more sense about the flow. So now let's go back to one level up, and over here we need to configure the UI. So for the UI, we have three different type: quick form, web form, and the linked UI. Since we want to connect Visual Builder to the process automation, we will select the linked UI option, and over here I can simply say Visual Builder Manager, and if I click on it, it will give me the option to provide the base URL and the payload attribute. So we don't have the Visual Builder application yet. What I'll do is like I'll go back to the parent label and I'll create one more, and I'll say linked UI, and this will be Visual Builder resubmit, and we'll come back over here once we have the Visual Builder UI. So for the form overall, what all information do we need, right? Because we didn't start creating the form app as of yet. So what we'll do is like we'll go to the types, and we'll create a business type, and I'll say employee info and click create. Here we can provide all the fields that will be required for the form. So we will add first name, last name, date of birth, email, and address. Over here, what we need to do is in the UI for the manager view, we need to create the payload attribute so that Visual Builder knows what it's going to assign. So I'll say input payload, and over here the type will be of employee info. Now let's get back to the process. First of all, we need to define few more data object. So we'll create one data object, and we can say VB form, and it will be of type business, and I can simply click on employee info payload, click create, and I can see those over here. So this VB form will contain all the information that we need from the form. And here for the submit employee info, we'll open the properties, and first of all we will define the argument definition. We'll leave the input as it is, and we'll select the data type employee info. Now let's open the data association, and on the left hand side we'll open the input and drag and drop that input on the left hand side. And for the new employee request, we will assign the process data, that is our VB form, and we'll click apply. And now in the approve request, what we want to do is open the property, and first of all we need to select the UI, and we click the manager view because manager will see this UI, right? At this point we can switch to Visual Builder and start creating our form, and then we can come back to process automation for further development. So let's activate this application. Let's go to the Visual Builder. We'll start by creating new application, call it employee info request. And over here, first thing first, we'll create a service connection. I'll click on the service connection, select from catalog, and I already have the process automation connected, so I'll click on that. Here we can see the new employee and new employee request, and we'll give it a name, new employee OPA. And now if I go to the endpoints, so if I go to the web application, I'll create a new web application. I'll say the name main, go ahead and click create. And in the main start, what I want to do is create a simple form based on the data that we have in the process automation. So to do that, I'll click on the data tab and expand the services, processes, and drag and drop the create option into the screen. And I'll click create form. Let's select all the input field for the form, organize them as needed, and we will also add process definition ID and click finish. So now we have our form ready, and we have the save button as well that will call the action chain to save this process. While we are here, let's also change the date of birth from input text to input date. So now we have the form in place and we want to test this out, right? We just simply want to test the first scenario where we are able to pass the information correctly. So in that case, what we want to do is we want to get the process definition ID as well. So we'll create another endpoint, and I'll click on the service connection, and I'll say define my endpoint, and here the base URL will be of type OPA itself. So we'll leave that as is. And what we want is we want to get the process interface API, and I'll click next, and I'll give the service name OPA so that in future if we need we can use that. And I'll go to the test, send request, save as example response, and here it will show up list of all the processes that I have. But what we want is a new employee, a requisition, right? So we can just search for new employee, and this is the definition ID. So I'll simply copy that. I'll go ahead and click create for now. And in the main start, what we want to do is like I'll go to the variables, and in the process definition ID which we selected initially, I simply want to pass the default value for now. And if I run this application, fill out the form, right, and I'll click save, so this should create a process in the background. So if I go to the process, and if I go to my process application, and if I click on workspace, I should be able to see the process created. So let's go to the tracking, and over here you can see the one which is created right now. And if I open, I can see there is a pending activity, and I can expand the audit as well. And now if I click open, this won't show anything because we have yet to connect Visual Builder to the process application. And for that, we will create a manager form and a resubmit form, and then we will connect this UI back to the process application. And here I'll duplicate this page one more time. So now we can work on the manager view and the submit view. And I'll simply rename these to manager view, and another one we'll rename it to resubmit. We'll go to the service connection and we click on the OPA that we created. And what we want to do is like we want to add few more endpoints over here. So for that, what we'll do is like we'll call this API and I'll say get payload. And to test this out, what I can do is I can go to the process, I can simply inspect, and if I go to the network tab, I'll click close. Look for the external UI network call, and there you will find the task ID path parameter, and you can copy the value for that. And I'll go to the visual builder, I'll paste this value over here. And if I click send, you see this is the payload, right? So we are getting the correct information. So I click save as example response and click save. And while we are here, when we resubmit the form, user will eventually update this payload as well, right? So we can do the same thing over here once again. So let me just add that as well. And instead of get, this will be of type put, and in the body I'll paste this and click on save example. Okay, so now let's click on the manager view, and over here what we want to do is we want to pre-fill this form when the manager comes to this page, right? So to do that, we'll click on the event listener, we'll create a new event listener called VB enter, click next, click finish, so that will create an action chain. And over here what we want to do is we want to call the REST endpoint, right? And we want to populate the data. So here we are calling the OPA, and then we'll click on the get, click select, and ID is something that we need to pass. But if you go back to the process, you see here the task ID is something that is already passed to the visual builder URL. We just want to capture this value. So in our visual builder, I'll go to the variable, I'll create a new variable called task ID, type is string, and I'll enable and pass on URL should be checked. So now if I go to the action chain, here I can simply pass that task ID to the ID. I'll click save over here, and the response will be basically the payload that we have assigned. So what we can do is we can select from here process dot data object, and I think all the other things, yeah, dot input, right? So dot input will contain all the other information that is required, and the value for this will be response body input payload. That's it, right? So I'll click that. So now just test this and see if it is actually working or not. So here what I can do is I can simply pass the task ID. So I have the task ID from here. So I'll copy this and paste it over here and set parameter. And you see the information is coming fine. So this is working as expected. And now we want to do the same logic for the resubmit, right? Because when we click on the resubmit, we want that information to be submitted again. But in this time, when we click the save button, it should be updated. So before we do that, actually let's go back to the manager view, and manager doesn't really need to have the save button. He will look at the information and he will approve or reject this, right? So I'll delete the save button over here, and maybe I can just mark it as like read only for what, instead of doing it individually, I'll click on the form layout and I'll mark it as read only, and label edge I'll make it start so it looks a little bit nicer. Okay, perfect. So now let's go to the resubmit, and over here first of all we have the save button and other information as well, but we'll do the same thing what we did for the manager view. After updating the resubmit page, we want to go to the page designer and we want to update the action chain for the save button so that it points to the update payload API. I'll click on the event and then I'll click on the action chain. Let's take a look at the action chain. We are assigning variable to say process is in progress and then validating the form. And then we are calling the API. So you see here we are calling the new employee create instance. We don't want that. We'll change that to OPA, put method, click select, and ID we already know it's in the task ID. We'll pass that information, click save. And for the body, we will create a new type from the endpoint and we will create a new variable. And then we will go back to the action chain and here we will create a new assign variable. And over here, I'll click on update and we will assign the correct value for this. And over here, we'll come back to the REST API once again and I'll map the body. So update payload is something that we want to pass to the body. All right. So we'll change the file notification message saying process record successfully created instead of that updated successfully. Perfect. And if there is a failure, it will throw a failure message. All right. And we'll remove this reset variable because once the user click save, we don't really want to resubmit in the process automation. Okay. So now we have our manager view and the resubmit view working correctly. And I'll go to the process now. And over here, what we want to do is we want to do some mapping correctly, right? So I'll go to the new employee 1.0. I'll go to the UI and over here we have a manager view, right? So by default, you see we have the main page over here defined. The problem with that is when our application is running, it will show the main page that the user is right now in, and this is what the main page looks like when the user is submitting. They won't be directly viewing the manager view or the resubmit view from here. So in order to go to the manager view page, what they want to do is like they have to navigate to a manager page, right? So how do we get that information? So if I go to the main start, maybe let's add a button just for a testing purpose, and I'll add button. I'll say manager view, OJ action, and here I simply want to navigate to a different page. Okay, so I navigate to page and manager view. Okay, when I run this application, what we want to do is like we just want to get the path for this manager view. So you see the path is page equal to shell, shell equal to main, and main equal to manager view. We are ready to stage our Visual Builder application and connect it back to the process application. So let's get back to the main start. And over here, first thing before we stage the application, we change the embedding setting in the security and allow embedding in any application domain. And now we'll stage the application. Once the application is staged, we'll copy the stage URL. So for that, we'll go to the home page, click on stage, and once the application is open, we'll copy this URL. Let's go back to the process application, and over here, we'll go to the UI first, click the manager view, and we'll paste the URL. Now we'll add parameters as well. So first is stage, main, and shell. We'll repeat the same thing for the resubmit as well. Once we are done with both manager and resubmit UI, we'll go to the process and we'll click on approve request and open the data association. On the left hand side, we will select the VB form, and on the right hand side, we'll expand the input payload and drag and drop that. We'll do the same thing for page. And here we want to pass the static value, so we'll put it in the codes. So that will be shell. For main, it's manager view. And for shell, it's main. And in the output, we want to define the output of this approver, right? So whether it's approved or not. So we'll drag and drop this task outcome, and in the process data, we will assign that to task outcome data object, and we click apply. And we'll repeat the same thing for the resubmit form as well. So we will start with VB form and over here input, and then we'll associate the page, main, and shell. And for the output, we will assign the output. And on the right hand side, we'll assign that to the VV form. Perfect. We'll click apply. Now our process is ready. What we will do is we'll do one more change in the roles. We have to assign approver and requester. So I'll assign myself as both approver and requester for this testing purpose. And now I can activate this application. Once the application is active, get the latest process definition ID using the service connection, and then we will test our application for the complete flow. All right, so now let's submit a form. Now let's get back to the process and we can reload this tracking and we should see the latest one. If I click on it, now if I click on the open for the approve request, here I should be able to see the latest form with the latest information. So this seems correct. Now what I want to do is recheck this form so that we can correct my last name. And over here you see this is a resubmit form. And once I click open, I should be able to modify the value and I'll correct my last name and click save and submit. At this point, we should be back at the approver. And now I can see my last name is corrected and I'll approve this flow. And now we have our whole application working. And this is it for this demo. We can also check the audit for seeing all the steps that we have performed in this process.